to restore ecosystems to their natural state, we want to plant what would have been there without human interference, and those are native species as opposed to invasive species, which can be species that are literally from the other side of the earth that would have never made it to that location without humans actually interfering. And we have loads of restoration organizations that have come to us, that have emailed us saying, I'm located here, what could I plant, what should I be planting? And we want to be able to answer them with a list of species that are adapted to that area and that are native to that country or that region. And so pretty soon when Restor will be launched, they won't actually have to email us, they will just be able to go onto the website, and this information will be one of the first features they see when they draw the polygon.
What I really think is the key contribution of this interaction between restoration groups and ecologists is that it really gives this nice avenue where these two different groups that typically operate somewhat independently can start to share data. You know, as a more fundamental scientist interested in ecological theory and core ecological questions, we often talk about how our research can inform these bigger, sort of large-scale ecosystem challenges, but we don't actually often have an opportunity to directly make sure that research feeds into those. So organizations like Restor and a lot of these NGOs and these nonprofits around the world are really giving scientists a way to actually make sure our research directly translates into action. And also we have a lot to learn from restoration and conservation groups. These are the people on the ground doing the science. And so we can also start to ask questions that are naturally a bit more useful and informative to the challenges that are being faced by the everyday ecologist on the ground. I think a lot of the challenges, we talk a lot about, you know, people will come to us and say, what types of species should we plant there in a specific region? How best do we manage for carbon? And certainly a lot of groups do this, but a lot of restoration groups and conservation groups, they're excellent at doing this work already. But one thing that we can do as scientists is start to take a bigger perspective to this. So we can start to say, okay, there are restoration groups all over the world, and they're essentially all doing science experiments. And right now, they're not necessarily communicating with each other. So as scientists, we can take what they're already doing, this incredible on-the-ground work, and give it a bit of scaffolding to turn it into something where we can learn from it. We can start to really build this collective action where restoration is no longer just individual groups, but we do an experiment here, we learn from something, and we can apply that to somewhere on the completely opposite side of the globe.
So we got a lot of requests from organizations all over the world doing restoration and conservation. And we as a lab wanted to connect them and helping them get the most up-to-date scientific insights on restoration and conservation and help them connect to either science and also amongst other organizations to share experiences and knowledge.
So I have to acknowledge again Lloyd Placey's group for collecting the data that goes into this species modeling pipeline. They actually had someone doing their civil service, which is alternative to the military service here in Switzerland, who was doing that in a research group, and this person collected thousands or millions of data points of presence data points of where different tree species are. So it's thanks to the work of this civil servant that we actually have all the input data for the trees, for the tree models. And this is from many different data sources, including GFBI and GBIF, but also more local data sets.
I think data management is sometimes seen as very easy to do and just quickly to do because it's just data. But if you think about having data for a global map like Nina does, it's millions of points and you have to handle this data, and it takes sometimes to run a model, it takes a day, sometimes even longer, and Nina does like 20,000 species, so she has to prepare a code that is so complex and also works just very smoothly, so she has to press run and it has to work for 20,000 species, and this takes sometimes a couple of days or even longer. And I think in the end it looks as if it's so easy to do and we see it on the map, and you don't really realize how much work you have to put in to do this. It's just, sometimes it sounds as if it's a boring job, but it's really exciting and also just very crucial part of the whole step towards restoring sites and towards Restor in general and the work we do at the lab. And I think it's just sometimes people get forgotten that do so much in the background.
So the global ecosystem refers to the ocean, the terrestrial biosphere, the climate, all the diversity of plants, animals, microbes on this planet, trying to understand how they interact with each other locally, at the landscape scale, at the regional scale, and at the global scale. Well, when we think of something like invasive species, that's a problem at the local scale, but these invasive species or non-native species, they're coming from places all over the planet. And so the problem is local in scope, but the origins of it are global in nature. And so to make informed restoration or conservation, we really have to understand how these two processes, these two scales interact, the local and the global scale, which is really at the heart of all ecology as well. So when we think of something like biodiversity loss or extinction of species or threatened species, again, this is something that we have to take a relatively large scale approach to. Species and populations can occur over thousands of kilometers. But at the same time, the only way we can really keep track of how different populations and communities and species are doing is by local data. And monitoring of these species is really key to understanding the health of ecosystems, the health of different populations, and in having a good understanding of how these different groups are fluctuating through time. We focus on native species because they're really the first step in understanding the health and resilience of ecosystems. And just like as humans, we respect different cultures and we realize that diversity of cultures is critical. These different native ecosystems are really critical to maintaining the health of our planet. But at the same time, native species are really just the first step here. Really what a lot of what we want to start to understand is how these native and natural communities are going to respond and adapt to climate change and various disturbances over the coming century.